I'm Ann Toback. I'm the CEO of the Workers' Circle. And if you're new to the Workers' Circle, we power progressive Jewish identity. We're a social justice organization that powers progressive Jewish identity through Jewish cultural engagement, Yiddish language learning. We have multi-generational education and altogether we do social justice activism. And we happen to feature the largest Yiddish language program in the world. We teach Yiddish 12 months of the year virtually, and we're really excited. We're going to be featuring our Yiddish Land retreat in person this August. And we do social justice activism. We've been virtual for a long time, for the last year plus, but we're also starting to do things in person. And if you want to know more about our social justice activism, our Jewish culture, our Yiddish language, more about the Jewish genealogy programs we're doing, please go to circle.org. It's so exciting to be with so many people. And I'll let you know, I first met our speaker tonight, Tomasz Cebulski, when he was the scholar in residence of our 2019 Jewish journey to Lithuania and Poland. It feels like yesterday, but it was really 2 years ago. And the Worker Circle is so excited as part of our deep dive into our progressive Jewish identity and Jewish cultural heritage to take people on a trip that really gives you the experience of 1,000 years of Jewish life in Lithuania and Poland. And we really go to the beginnings of Jewish cultural heritage. And we look at our proud Yiddish history of resistance, of resilience. And of course, we don't ignore the tragedy, the unbelievable end to that rich cultural heritage of the Holocaust. We spend time remembering, commemorating, and remembering the lives of the 6 million people who lived, and recognizing the loss that our people experienced. So I'm just going to let everyone know that we are now excited to be planning our next Jewish journey to Lithuania and Poland as our scholar in residence. And you will receive more information. It'll probably, we're not sure yet, but we think it'll probably be a year from now, toward the end of May in 2022. And it's a trip that nobody should miss. It's really, we make it the trip of a lifetime to connect, to tangibly connect with the Jewish cultural heritage and experience. We have meaningful and an amazing time there, and you learn more than you think possible. We're asking you if you have questions during this program. You can put them in the chat or in the Q&A, and Tomasz will get to as many as he can. So now let me introduce our speaker tonight, Tomasz Cebulski. He has spent the last 20 years perfecting his knowledge on the archival resources in Poland and Central Europe. He has 2 master's degrees and a PhD from Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Tomasz holds multiple state guiding certificates from the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum in Krakow and Galicia. I will say that he leads our group. He led our group through, and it was just an incredible and meaningful experience for us all. One that we will never forget, and we should never forget. So Tomasz is also, in addition to being a scholar and leading these tours, he's an experienced genealogist, and he has started, he has established a genealogy research and history interpretation center called Polin Travel. And all of you will be receiving information how you can connect with Polin Travel online in a thank you email tomorrow. And this initiative combines genealogy, historical sites, interpretation, and travel. And in the past year, he's reinvented his approach to history and using the vantage points of our virtual world to help tell the story of heritage and genealogical research. So tonight he's going to be sharing some of his knowledge with us, and I think it's time to introduce and turn the program over to Tomasz. So welcome, and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anne, for the introduction. Thank you very much for welcoming our guests from all over the world, I have to say. So this is humbling and putting a lot of pressure, but it's a pressure which I hope I will stand up to. Yes, I just realized that in the ideal world, and I do believe that the ideal world exists somewhere, we shall be meeting right now somewhere in Krakow, somewhere in Poland during one of the next Workers' Circle visits to Poland. Well, next year for sure. But today, a few words about genealogy. Of course, being given about an hour to talk, we can move around the certain surface of genealogical research. So I want to follow the title of this meeting, and the title is The Taste of Jewish Genealogy. So I was considering for a while whether I shall not put up a culinary show, which are very much in fashion right now. So I'll maybe do something in between a culinary show and a genealogy research, and that will give us a taste at the end, at least. So I do really hope that you all have your cooking ingredients and you are ready. Do you? I hope so. When it comes to Jewish genealogy, I mean, there's quite a lot to be said. And I decided for today to focus on the basics. Because I have a sense doing genealogy for the last 20 years and working with people who are starting the genealogies, that the basics is always omitted, silenced, never considered, and rarely educated to the young adepts of genealogy. And the basics is very important to have a solid foundation for our research. I've met a lot of people who are literally dissecting the genome right now, but they have a problem in answering the simple question, why are they doing it? So why do you do genealogy? What's the driving force behind that? Why do you asking those questions? This is a fundamental question that shall be asked. And I prepared a little presentation for today, which slightly adheres to the culinary show I was talking about. So let's start with a nice picture of a kitchen. For those of you who are super advanced in genealogy, stay tuned, because there will be also quite a lot of hopefully good and helpful content about the resources which are not necessarily as obvious as we all think. So we're starting in the kitchen in order to get some taste, and going into asking a question, what are the needed ingredients for successful genealogical research? In my opinion, there are four. One of them is curiosity, another one is rationality, another one are the sources, and then the data presentation. So I've figured out those four to talk today. Curiosity is absolutely important because it's a magnificent driving power for our growth as human beings. And no, it's not true that curiosity killed the cat. On the contrary, I think that without curiosity, there's no cat. And by the way, even if the cat was killed, I think there was more of a coincidence than curiosity involved. In the Polish version of the same saying, we are going a couple of steps forward, unfortunately. And we are teaching a pretty dangerous saying to our kids, which goes, curiosity is the first step to hell. And that's a very strong statement, which unfortunately makes quite a lot of kids silent and hesitant in asking questions as they go through life. I can particularly see it now when education moved online and you are confronting silence. This being said, I'm asking you to ask questions. So if you have any questions connected with the content I'm presenting, or any questions that you may have specifically about your research that relates to what I'm talking about, then please do ask questions, because I'm, in spite of growing up in Poland, I'm pretty much basing all of my life on questions that are asked and trying to tackle and answer those questions. But talking about curiosity and family history, I think the curiosity of family history grows and matures in us over time. Yes, it's connected partly with aging, not always, but connected with generational change, I would call it. The more we follow the instincts and the need of leaving some heritage behind us, the more we want to know what was left out there for us. So what is out there in the back? What is out there in our family? We have a need of establishing or showing a certain continuum, of time. And genealogy is super helpful here. Genealogy, at the end of the day, provides actually this continuum for us and for our families. All in all, family history is a domain that directly created the reality in which we all live our contemporary lives. Yes, it did. And its understanding may give us a better and more responsible way of comprehending ourselves here and now. At least in my case, it works. But not only understanding us here and now, but also understanding of genealogy, understanding of where we are coming from, understanding of the experiences of our family can definitely, and I have experienced it in the genealogical cases I've worked on, can help us to better plan and execute our future. So this being said, genealogy becomes a pretty important domain of life, which is pretty often forgotten. So the question why is very important. And I would ask you right now to ask yourselves a question: why do I do it? And try to answer in as simple way as you can. If you want, you can actually share your one word or one sentence answer on the chat or in the Q&A section. That will be an interesting task to do, to see your answers and to compare the notes in a sense. By the way, curiosity itself is just enough of a reason to start genealogy, just curiosity. But people have all kinds of ideas. Sometimes people want to do it because their neighbor is doing it. Sometimes they want to do it because they want to have a conversation starter. Sometimes they want to do it because they are interested in finding just one family or one circumstance of life or death. Sometimes people do it because they feel that something is missing from their family tree or history. So there are all kinds of motivations, and I really encourage you to ask this question and answer this question. Why? Because answering this question, the answer why you do genealogy very often defines the way how you do it, very often defines the way how do you proceed with your genealogical research. In my specific case of doing genealogy, particularly doing Jewish genealogy, for me, the reason is simple. For me, genealogy has always been a gateway to teach history. For me, in case of doing genealogy, the context matters the most. And the context and the history that you can learn in the course of doing genealogy helps you to retrieve from oblivion the people and facts which, in my specific case, constituted Polish history and very much created the reality and culture in which I live my life today. So this is enough of a reason to do genealogy. And it's really very much regardless of the people that I'm looking for or questions I'm asking, and regardless of their standing in the larger history as such. Whether it's David Grün from Pinsk, or maybe Josele the Holy Miser, who is a semi-legendary figure. In spite of being semi-legendary, his grave is still located on the Rima cemetery in Krakow, which is one of the oldest Jewish cemeteries in Europe. It's 1500. Or maybe strongly opinionated Jewish woman from Krakow like Sarah Schenirer, looking for their genealogy and uncovering their history is in most cases doing our lives more complete. At least my life for sure. In case of David Grün from Pinsk, anybody recognize who David Grün is? Well, David Grün from Pinsk is the founding father of Israelis, the first David that established the state. Sarah Schenirer that I mentioned is the founding mother of Beit Yaakov. So yes, genealogy is a gateway to civilization which pretty much created the reality in which we live today. So all of those stories matter, and retrieving those stories is very much about filling a certain void that was unfortunately left because of two totalitarian systems that Central Europe encountered and had to confront in 20th century. Doing genealogy is very much confronting the last two stages of every genocide, the stage of denial and the stage of silence. All in all, I guess to quote from Yad Vashem program, Lakol ish yesh sham, Lakol ish yesh sham. So every person has a name, and retrieving those names very much matters in bringing their life forward and bringing these stories to the public attention. So this being said about curiosity, rationality, shortly. Rationality is very important in genealogical research. Why? Well, you first need to have a rational analytical mind. Yes, you need to have a mind which will be set for a lot of details. And by the way, genealogy is a very good exercise for your mind. Genealogy is a science. Genealogy definitely is a science. For a long time period, it was kind of pushed into being called one of the auxiliary sciences of history, in spite of the fact that in the very word genealogy, there is a Greek form logi, which means science or intellect. It was pushed on the side as an auxiliary science. Right now, I think it's very much in the forefront of considerations when we think about history as such, particularly the place we are originating. So genealogy is a science, and this being said, it requires certain methodology. It also requires, and I encourage it very strongly to all of my students, to follow the cause-effect relations. It's very important in doing history and doing genealogy to look for cause-effect relations. Establishing those helps you to build a good genealogical research and helps you to build a good tree. The added value of establishing the cause-effect relation is the fact that you also learn history. You learn the broader context around it. And okay, learning for the sake of learning is great, but learning the context helps you to understand and remember, and also helps you to share what you've researched with the others. Believe me, it's very hard to quote to a person who is even interested in genealogy, it's very hard to quote a list of a couple of hundreds or even a couple of dozens of names and surnames. But putting those into context is a completely different story. So this being said, as a couple of opening remarks, curiosity and rationality. Now we go into something that probably every genealogist is always looking for: sources. History, and genealogy is a part of history, is based on sources. And sources as such, we have documents, photos, objects, interviews, at least in the classification that I'm presenting. And then the last thing from the ingredients is the data presentation. So let me switch to another slide. This still talks about methodology, so addresses the rationality that I was mentioning. The very basic kind of sketchy methodology of doing research, identifying, so first ask the question why and what are you looking for. Sometimes you look very broad, but maybe before looking broad, try to focus on what you already have. Try to call the auntie that you never talked, or try to call this uncle that you did not have relation for a long time, and ask him questions. Identify what are your resources. And I'm trying always to convince people that actually very often there is no need for genealogy research made by some external researcher, because very often the answer is within the family. Then plan your research, then do the search, execute the search itself. Of course, right now there's a gazillion of all kinds of online genealogy, let's call them supermarkets or machines or databases, which you can use, which are providing the answers kind of instantly, sometimes too instantly. But they are establishing a very good starting point. And they are very often whetting your appetite for a little bit more. So they are great help in genealogy, something which we did not have 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Then analyze the data you have, try to make matches, try to follow the cause effect relation which works in your family, and then conclude. Conclude here is very much about data presentation. And about data presentation, I'll be talking a little bit later. This is once more the ingredients that we need for our dish today. So curiosity, rationality, sources, and data presentation. Let's go to sources right now. So let's go to the hardcore of what I wanted to present today. I've already talked a little bit about all of those large conglomerated databases like JewishGen, like GRI Poland, like Ancestry.com, like MyHeritage, and so on. They are of course a great help and sometimes provide results instantly. Sometimes, unfortunately, they provide results too fast and they kill the pleasure. But that's a topic for another meeting. I've grouped sources here into documents, into photos, maps, into objects, into interviews, which is a pretty important source that we are paying attention to only recently, only in the last 10, 20 years. When it comes to documents, of course, things that every genealogist is looking for: vital records, censuses, immigration lists, ship manifest, police and security records, and so on. And I wanted to share with you a certain insight of resources which are not that greatly known, but are easy online accessible from various archives in Poland, or not necessarily in Poland. When you're starting any kind of research in Poland or in Central Europe, I highly advise you to visit the website of a local state archival unit, because this website, although in Polish, but you can use Google Translator in order to have it automatically translated to English, will give you an index of all of the resources which are already digitized and made available. And here I just chose two cities. So the city of Lublin and the city of Lublin. I would need to know from you whether your presentation also followed the link. So do you see the database that I want to share? I will right now share the database. So right now you can definitely see it. Okay, so so this is, for example, something which is easily accessible from the first page of the archive in Lublin, and it's a wonderful resource which is not being indexed by any of those larger conglomerating records search engines or databases. Those are population censuses. And those are population censuses or the registration books, to translate it directly, from the city of Lublin, but also from the couple of other major cities of the Lublin district, so Chełm, Kock, Kraśnik, Międzyrzec Podlaski, and Radzeń Podlaski. And it's all nicely digitized and fully searchable. Again, of course, you can switch the language here on the upper right side. You can switch the language to English. Very often, it's kind of funny translated, I have to say. So I'm sometimes advising to rather use the Google Translate on such pages, because it probably works out better. Sometimes you may finish with the surnames being translated, which is kind of a problem. So then you can switch back into the original language in order not to have mistakes. So this is one of the interesting resources, which is not being indexed by those large conglomerating databases of records. Then if I leave here, I can take you to another website, which is a website of the archives in Łódź. And again, I'm showing you the Polish version, unfortunately, because I deliberately checked before this presentation what happens if I'm entering this website of an archive in its original English version. Nothing happens. There's close to nothing in the English version of this website. They don't give you any links to any internal resources. They are pretty much asking you to contact the archive in English or Polish, and they will give you the answers. But if you follow the Polish version with Google Translate, one of the first links to follow is the links of the already digitized records. And there is a mine of information here. So they give you, for example, Akta Stanu Cywilnego. So they give you an access to a database which contains the vital records. There is wyszukiwarka nazwisk, which means the search machine by surnames. But also you can search by the cities in the Łódź district. That's a great tool. But there's more. Because when you scroll down a little bit, there is something which is called Ewidencja Ludności Miast i Gmin, which means census, population census. And it's not only the one population census that is made available for GRI, Jewish Records Indexing Poland, which, by the way, is doing a magnificent work for the last 30 years in bringing genealogy data to people. So it's not only this population census from 1916 to 1921, but also all kinds of earlier censuses, all kinds of lists of unstable or not permanent residents of the city, but also books of the population movement in the city of Łódź, 1931-39, which is very important, and also other cities, Aleksandrów Łódzki, Konstantynów, Ruda Pabianicka, Wicebruska, and so on. So that's a wonderful resource. If you are if you happen to research in Łódź district, then the Łódź archive pretty much did a great job in digitizing records. By the way, in the last 10-15 years, the Polish archive spent enormous money on record digitalization and putting it online. And in most cases, those are particularly Jewish records in order to make them available. Of course, you got a little bit lower. You've got all kinds of databases about the Łódź ghetto, which is definitely one of the best documented ghettos in occupied Europe. And this entire database is digitized and available following this link here. So it's the Ghetto Verwaltung, so-called, so the administration of the Judenrat of Łódź ghetto. What I'm trying to tell here is when you're starting a research, please have a look on the website of a local archive, state archive that relates to this territory, and have a look the best in the Polish part of this website of what is available right now, because you might be looking for records for a long time and they are at the hand's reach. Already available at the archival website. Okay, returning to the sources. I hope you can see the sources right now. Genealogy Indexer, that's a wonderful tool which most of the genealogists are fully aware of. I won't show it right now, but it's a search engine which is searching for all kinds of yellow pages, business indexes, bank accounts indexes, or any kind of business registers, pretty much from late 1900s all the way into 1950s sometimes. And it's very intuitive. It's enough to put in a surname of a person we are looking for. And I'm always also putting, to narrow it down, the name of a place if I know the place, and it can give you instant results pretty fast. A little bit more of an insider story when it comes to records, and I was talking a little bit that the police and the security apparatus records are of interest, is the so-called Index Represjonowanych. For those of your families whose history is connected with being resettled from Poland, resettled in the first year of war, and resettled into the East, which means for the Jewish families that happen to be within this close to 80 to 90,000 of Polish Jews that had questionable pleasure to encounter the Soviet apparatus of terror, so be in contact with NKVD in 1939, their records will be in this database, which is called Index Represjonowanych. That's a very interesting database, which was built from the 90s, based on the Russian archives, and it looks like this. Let me show you. It looks like this. Index. So this is the main website. It was developed for many years by the Russian NGO, which is called Memorial, and Polish governmental organization, which is called Karta. And it has at least indexes of all of the Polish Christians and Polish Jews that were in any kind of contact, imprisonment, interrogation by the Soviet security services, and very often also the information about them being resettled or deported somewhere into Siberia, most likely. This database is very imperfect. This database, unfortunately, is very case sensitive. So when you're typing in a name or surname into this database, you have to write it carefully, case by case. It has zero tolerance for misspellings. So I'm very often running multiple searches with different spellings, only using the first letters of surname in order to identify a trace of a person. Returning into our sources, Bada Rosen. I mean, obviously, probably everybody of you knows what the Bada Rosen is. That was a central German archive which stored all of the Red Cross databases and all of the displaced persons camps in Germany, Austria, and other parts of Europe. For many years, it was sitting out there in Bada Rosen in Germany. And it was very hard to be accessed. Those of you who ever tried to access Bada Rosen, you may remember that having an answer from Bada Rosen was sometimes taking up to 9 months or a year. Finally, about 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken, about 2 years ago, Bada Rosen started to share this database publicly. So this is the website of the Bada Rosen archive, especially if you are looking for survivors, if you are looking for immigrants, if you are looking for immigration into Palestine or later Israel, or if you are looking for immigration into Australia or United States after the war, if you are looking for some family members that survived. Also, this database, of course, has maybe not very large, but certain content about people who were in the German Nazi camps and those who became victims. So it's also very imperfect. It's also very case sensitive. So you have to very often check and try different spellings in order to make it work. Also remember one thing: if you are ever using this database, it gives you scans of records. If you are ever using this database, remember that this online version has only a very small part of what is out there. If I remember correctly, our Rosen archive has about 200 millions of pages. So we are talking about a humongous database. If you want to double your chances of a result based on this database, I also encourage you to write a query to the US Washington, D.C. Holocaust Memorial Museum, because they've copied this entire database somewhere in early 2000s. And they also have their own researchers running the searches on this records. So those are pretty interesting resources when it comes to documents. Photos and maps. NAC, this is the Polish system of showing you historical pictures stored in the Polish archives. I won't be showing it. You can play with that later. It has quite a lot of content of Jewish sites, pre-war pictures of Jews in Poland, and so on. Yad Vashem. Yad Vashem, a part of course, being what it is, and an outstanding research institution and educational institution, is also a huge database of not only documents, but also pictures, photos. And those are pictures from pretty much all over Central Europe, not necessarily related to the Holocaust. A lot of the family pictures which are stored in Yad Vashem. And the great thing about it is that it's extremely well labeled and described. So I was very often very successful in just typing a name or surname in a place into this database, and I got the pictures of people. I got the pictures of people who lived in some place before the war, who were Holocaust victims or who were survivors. So here you can see just a sample of this. The power of this database is, as I said, the stories are extremely well and detailedly captured. They have very good captions, and in this way, we are able to use it as a great resource in building family trees. Okay, returning. Sorry for shuffling the presentations, but I hope it's readable for you. When it comes to maps, maps are very important in genealogy, especially if you want to pin down geographically your search, or if you want to see where was the local Jewish community, for example, because this local Jewish community for a specific town that you are looking for was most likely holding the records, was most likely the Jewish Kehillah, so the vital records will be there. But also maps are very important in the content presentation. I mean, I cannot imagine doing a genealogical research without having a good visual of where am I focusing at. And when it comes to maps, there is a wonderful service called VIG, and this is an online database of various Polish military maps from different time periods, mostly 20s and 30s. Very often, if you are looking for some small hamlets, very often we have a problem in having the name of a place or having the name of a part of a city, and having a major problem of finding it. The problem here is very often such that we know of a place existing, but the nearby city grew and incorporated this town or incorporated this village, and the name is lost. But if you enter into this website and you go into those indexes here on the left, again, you can use Google Translate. You will have different scale maps, most likely from the 30s, because most of the maps here are from the 30s. This is also a great tool, which I'm personally using for the localization of Jewish cemeteries. Yes, we often have a problem in various parts of Poland. That's maybe a topic for another meeting, but the Holocaust was not only about extermination and murder of the people. The Holocaust was about an entire extermination and demolition of traces of people, their culture, synagogues, and cemeteries included. And very often when I'm looking for Jewish cemeteries in some place, and there is a hesitation, there are mixed sources, there is not definitive answer, then a map from the 30s gives you an exact location. And there's a specific way of marking Jewish cemeteries. It will be always an encircled area with, in case of Christian cemeteries, there will be a cross, of course. In case of Jewish cemeteries, there will be a T letter. Don't ask me why T. There is a T letter within this area that is a Jewish cemetery. That was a marker being used. So maps are a great way of getting an insight of the story, but also, as I said, presentation of your finds. Objects. Why have I put objects in sources of genealogy? Objects matter, particularly subjectively in family history. Objects matter a lot. To give you a case why objects matter, well, everybody has some objects at home, and objects are wonderful in telling a story. Objects are wonderful into engaging another family members into the story. So, for example, I just opened my drawer. There's an object like this, which was passed down in my family. It's an old Omega watch. Such watches were given to rail workers in Galicia in second half of 1800s when the rail system was developed. So a watch like this may start an interesting narrative within the family. Okay, but why does it matter for genealogy? Do you know any cases of objects which are important for genealogical research, which can give you some data? Well, there is a very specific object, and this object is called matzeva. Yes, the Jewish cemetery stones are objects, and they are extremely important in doing genealogy research because they give you a lot of data on the family, maybe not a lot, quite a lot of data on the family. And of course, we have a lot of search engines for stones or records from the cemeteries, which are hooked into the Jewish gen, for example. But I would like to point your attention into two wonderful resources which are very little known. One of them is called Gidonim, and that was an Israeli project of registering Jewish cemeteries in Poland, which was already started, if I'm not mistaken, late 90s. And the other one is kind of a central place right now in Poland, which is called Wirtualny Cmentarz, virtual cemetery, cemetery.jewish.org.pl. That's a kind of a central database, which is showing the record from all of the Jewish cemeteries, which were up until now indexed. And in order to show you those two, let me just switch gears. This is the Gidonim project, which is a wonderful resource, especially if you are looking for Częstochowa territory. I'm going to show you later on films from Częstochowa. So without this database, my research in Częstochowa on the Jewish cemetery would probably go nowhere. What do we get within the Gidonim project? Well, we get quite a lot because we get Będzin, we get Błażowa, we get Helm, the Helm on the east, the Helm next to Belarusian border. At the same time, Helm. We get Chrzanów, we get Częstochowa, Izbica, Kromołów, Józefów, Jędrzejów, and a couple of other Pabienica, Piotrków, and a couple of other places. It's a fully searchable database. So if you enter into, let's say, Częstochowa, you have a search engine. It's loading slow. Yeah, there is a search engine somewhere. Search graves in Częstochowa here under the pictures. There will be a search engine in which you can type a name, a surname, and it will give you results with an exact location of where the grave is located or where it has been located those 20 years ago when the cemetery was indexed. Also, it has an index of couple of mass graves, Bezeshic, Józefów, Kraśnik, also with names and surnames of people buried in retrieved. So that's one of the, let's say, less known databases. A little bit better known database is the database, which, as I said, is collectively showing you the results of indexation of Jewish cemeteries over the last 20, 30 years. And this is the website run by the Foundation of Documentation of Jewish Cemeteries in Poland. And it's also fully searchable. And so you can go into it. Also has English version, and here the English version is parallelly developed to the Polish one. So you can just use the English version and go into search. The nice thing about it is that if you type in, it will show you all kinds of cemeteries that this surname is related to. I've actually put the surname of Ellengold, which is pretty rare, and it's only pretty much a Warsaw surname. So here we got Ellengold Lea. It shows you the picture of the stone as it was taken during the cemetery indexation. For those of you who are from Warsaw, hooray, hooray, pretty much the indexation of the Okopowa Jewish Cemetery, which was a tremendous indexation effort, has finished a couple of years ago. I mean, the Okopowa Jewish Cemetery is one of the largest Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and there is over 200,000 of matzevot still there. So in case of this particular one, you get the location of the stone, you get the information from the stone also translated. It also tells you that the matzevah is partly covered by the dirt. It's in the ground. So that's a database which is worth visiting and playing with a little bit. So this is how we went through objects. Now, I've also put here interviews, and interviews are of essence, especially that I've told you somewhere that for me, when I'm answering the question to myself, why do I do genealogy research? I pretty much always answer that it is to understand history and it is to build a historical context. And there's probably no better way of doing history and finding historical context than dealing with interviews with survivors, or with interviews with eyewitnesses, interviews with witnesses of history. And of course, here comes the Shoah Foundation. Shoah Foundation is searchable. You can go into their website. But pretty recently, Jewish Gen started to provide also the results linked to the Shoah Foundation interviews. Let me show you how such results are looking like. Where were we here? So those results are looking as following. Yeah, this is what you will get in a result from a search in Jewish Gen right now, which gives you the result of interview indexed within the Shoah Foundation. It gives you quite a lot of details, which means that it gives you all of the details that were extracted from this interview by the interviewee, by the interviewer, and it gives you all kinds of names that might be used in this interview. It gives you places, it gives you dates of birth, and so on. So that's also a very important database to go through. Of course, if you are finding something relating to your family, the best would be to order through Shoah Foundation to order such a record so that you can play it for yourself and see how it's working. All right, so this was a little bit of a presentation for those who are more advanced with genealogy and we're looking for some genealogical meat of databases and having a little bit of an insight of what is out there. But going towards the end of what I want to talk about and show you, let me go into the last slide, which I'm trying hard to move forward. It doesn't want to move. Okay, there we go. A couple of things to remember. And here we go into the last ingredients of our meal, which means the data presentation methods. Extremely important. Very often we skip it through, we omit that, and that's a mistake. Data presentation methods are very important, and you should give yourself the time to go there and do it. Data presentation methods shall be readable to you, but also readable to others. If genealogy is a science, and it is a science, then it has to be repetitive. So another genealogist, another person interested in that, shall be able to retrace your steps. So when you document, try to make it in a way so that it's retraceable. And of course, data presentation concepts are various. You can go trees, report charts, indexes, and so on. I was all the time struggling with how to show the historical records and how to show the genealogical records, but including into that the historical context. So how do you present genealogical finds, but also implement the historical context, which for me matters the most? And the pandemic gave me an answer. So last year, I started to produce genealogical research movies. So films which are integrating the site of memory, so the site I'm working at, with the data I found, and there is a history, family history narrated on top of that. So I'm trying to show on the film, which is usually about half an hour, 45 minutes, I'm trying to show the process of doing genealogy, the records, and I'm debating those records. And I'm trying to connect this family history to the larger history narrative that was happening, but also to the physical place. I'm using cameras, I'm using drones, which is also offering a slightly different vantage point into what I want to show. And this being said, I will ask right now Danielle to play us some very short 1-2 minutes clips from one of my film on Częstochowa. I'll stop sharing.
Dr. Jakov Szatsky describes the beginnings of Jewish community in Częstochowa in those words in the Częstochowa Itzka books. It is difficult to establish when Jews actually settled in Częstochowa. The first mention of Jewish matters concerning the city relates to the Frankist movement, when Jacob Frank, 1726-1791, was convicted of blasphemy in a rabbinical court in 1760, he was sent to Częstochowa. He was imprisoned in the fortress there for 13 years, until the Russian general Bibikov captured the fortress, freed him. Then Dr. Szatsky in the Itzka book goes into the description of large numbers of followers of Jacob Frank who settled in Częstochowa, but most likely this movement dispersed. One thing is sure. By 1760s there is already a synagogue established. This building is renovated and refurbished in the late 1800s. The last renovation was in the later 20s under the careful eye of Professor Peretz Willenberg. This was the southern district of Częstochowa that became the Jewish district, but also the place of very rapid 1800s industrialization. The city grew. In mid-1800s it was located on the major international rail system. Central location, the vicinity of German border in 1800s, but also good transportation changed Częstochowa very fast into a modern city with modern city planning and great hopes for the future. In the same time, the Jewish population is growing rapidly, as most of the poorer merchants or tradesmen from the nearby towns and communities are starting to come massively to the city.
Okay, so this was just an introductory narration, which goes on and gives you the insight about the history of Jewish community in Częstochowa. Danielle, may I have another clip? I know we're running out of time. Thanks.
sometimes working at the Jewish cemetery is less a work of a historian or a genealogist, but it unexpectedly, or expectedly, changes into a work of an archaeologist. Luckily, the Częstochowa Jewish Cemetery, in spite of the fact that the original cemetery records did not survive, luckily this cemetery in the last 20 years was re-registered a couple of times. First time by a local historian named Paszkowski, then Benjamin Yari, and finally the Gidonim project of Israeli high schools registered the graves. And thanks to the work of all of those people, it's even possible to unearth right now a grave which was toppled over. And this one obviously belongs to Naftali Handwerker, who lived within 1854 to 1935. He was buried in October of 1935, and he is the son of Berek. So that's one of the uncles that stayed behind in Poland.
Okay, thank you very much. So that was another little snippet from this film showing you the Jewish cemetery in Częstochowa and what you can actually do thanks to the Gidonim project, which I was talking about a little bit earlier. And by the way, Handwerker is a pretty unique surname. So I see somebody writing that recognizes the surname. It's pretty unique to Częstochowa specifically. And there was a question about a complete Częstochowa film. It's fully available from my YouTube channel, and the Walkman Circle is going to share the link with that definitely, so that you can watch the entire half an hour. Do we have a time for another 2 minutes?
Yes, we do. And I was going to tell you, if you wanted to take a few questions, that would be fine.
Absolutely. So while we are watching those 2 minutes, I don't have to watch it anymore. I've watched it too often and too much already. And I will just scroll through the questions and try to answer some.
So this is a building at Katedralna 13th Street in this very city center of Częstochowa. This is the address, which was the family address pretty much starting from the 20s. So we know that the correspondence was being sent here. I looked through the Getter register and the censuses during the wartime period, actually one of them existing, and this was the place where Nuchem Mishka would live. Nuchem Mishka was the son of Shaya.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Danielle. The thing which is great about those movies is that they're fully shareable. And I didn't plan it. I just wanted actually to continue my history narrative, which I was doing for 20 years. And the film was a medium for me in order to continue my narrative in the time of pandemic. I didn't plan the fact that probably I will stay with doing films even after pandemic is finished. Because having a film, people leave Poland after genealogical research with something in their hand and something that is wonderfully shareable among family members. That was something that was a problem way too often when people were returning from an experience of doing research in Poland. And it was almost impossible to pass down this experience to other family members. And having a film like this, you can do it easily, and it's engaging for all generations. It was also engaging for teenagers. Based on those films, I was later on also doing kind of history genealogy meetings with those families involved. And there were 20, 30 people showing up to discuss what is on the film. And it was a great educational experience, especially for me. To answer some of the questions, there was a question about a book which I can recommend about Polish history or Polish Jewish history. Well, there's quite a lot. I think if you want a historical book, which is kind of general, I would recommend Norman Davis, which is titled God's Playground. That's a British historian who specializes in Poland, and it's called God's Playground. And that's a nice book. When it comes to Jewish experience in Poland, well, Eva Hoffmann-Staetel, that's probably an important one. If you want an overview of Polish Jewish history, I highly recommend, so that you are buying online, a catalog to the Polin Museum exhibit. Polin Museum is something which is definitely worth seeing live, because it's one of the best museums in Europe right now. And it's an institution devoted to 900 years of history of Polish Jewry, but it's impossible to embrace this number of historical details, even if you're spending one day there. But having a catalog first and preparing for the trip based on this catalog is a wonderful exercise, believe me. So when it comes to books, probably that will be it. There was a question about links presentation. I saw something. Do you have sources for towns? That's Laurie asking. For towns which are right now in Ukraine, but used to be in Poland, Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yes, there are such sources. They are scarcely documented by GRI Poland, but you can find them in the Polish so-called Central Archives of Old Records. How do you get there? You type into Google 4 letters, AGAD, A-G-A-D, archives, AGAD archives. And that's the Central Archives of Old Record. And this is a storage of a part of very old records from Poland. This is also a place where we are storing all of those vital records that were evacuated from the eastern parts of Poland before 1939, which happened to be, what word to use? Friendly taken by the Soviet army in 1939 and then never returned back. So all of those territories of nowadays Western Belarus and Western Ukraine had their records evacuated, of course, assuming those records survived. And they are right now made available for the AGAD records. And most of them actually, especially Jewish, are digitized and available for the AGAD website. I think that's, do you see any questions which are urgent to be, I mean, all questions are important and urgent, I know, but where can I look beyond resources, Klezmer family bands? Oh, that's a very specific question about Klezmer family bands. Actually, when it comes to Klezmer family bands, what I would recommend you is to contact the people who are behind the Jewish festival in Krakow. Because the people who are behind the Jewish festival in Krakow, and it's also very easily searchable, mostly Janusz Makuch or Robert Gondek, and they have a certain enormous expertise in Jewish traditional music. And even if they don't know it, they've got contacts with all kinds of experts that may know it. Okay, I think we are, how is the museum spelled? P-O-L-I-N, P-O-L. I'm very bad at English spelling, but probably I didn't make a mistake.
You're right.
Polin.
No, that's exactly it.
Polin Museum of Polish Jewry, Museum of History of Polish Jewry. That's something which is worth visiting, or at least having a catalog of. Okay, so I run a little bit beyond time, but I hope it was worth it. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope I covered it all. I will just return for a brief second to my last slide, if I can only get there, okay? And my last slide is, we want to move. It's loading pretty slowly. It doesn't want to go to the last slide. Okay, so we need to continue our lives without.
As we do, in any case, people can hear me, and I want to thank you so much, Tomasz. And in an hour's time, you've really taken us back 900 years, and what an amazing video. And I want to assure people that you'll be receiving an email tomorrow with all sorts of incredible materials that Tomasz has recommended during this past hour. I want to let everyone know that we're continuing our travels through Jewish genealogy on June 2nd at 7:30 p.m. when we're going to be talking about the phenomenon of home DNA testing with Libby Copeland. And Libby Copeland has written a book all about how DNA testing is upending who we are. And you can imagine this combination of sleuthing, and over 37 million people now have been tested. And according to Libby Copeland, that's really a tipping point. I know I've been tested and learned that I was 99.9% Ashkenazic Jewish. So
are you surprised?
No, not so much. But it is a fascinating way to connect with your history. So I hope everyone considers that, and you can go to circle.org and you'll all receive information in the email tomorrow, and we'd love to see you again. And please be in touch with us at info@circle.org if you have any follow-up to this program. And thank you, Tomasz. Thank you, everyone who's joined us. And I look forward to seeing people again soon.